Welcome to a very special episode of the CBSI Tales from the Flipside podcast. I'm Nico, your weekend update correspondent, and this is Comic Book Strategic Investment. We are incredibly thrilled to be joined today by none other than the primary grader for CGC. Matt, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Nelson, primary grader at CGC, collector, lover of comics. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this interview. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Matt. I heard you describe yourself as a collector. Do you perceive yourself as a collector first?
I did. It went through stages. First, yes, of course. When I first started back as a kid and even into, my 20s, I was definitely a collector. And there's a saying in comics that you can either be a collector or a dealer, but you can't be both. And so inevitably, I did gravitate into the dealer area, and so I never really held on to a lot of stuff. I think the thrill of the chase is it for me. I buy something, and I have it for a good while. Sometimes I'll hold the stuff forever, but ultimately the chase is what's fun. So I like having owned different books. I can't own them all at the same time. So, so I think that's where the buying and the selling and all that. So collecting, I've always collected, but it's always changed. And, I guess, having seen as much as I have, I probably end up collecting a lot of weird stuff that no one would care about.
That's the name of our game here at Tales from the Flipside. You are speaking our language.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about how you got into comics as a young person, when that started for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, let's see, I was born in 74 and 46. So G.I. Joe was like I was into Legos, and I was into, all the stuff that we all were in the 80s. But G.I. Joe was like the big thing for me. And I remember the comic series was, in hindsight, was actually like really well written. It was really, and I think maybe that's what did it for a lot of us. But I got hooked on issue number 49. I saw a commercial for it on TV. I'd been collecting the toys for a couple of years, and went out to the store, bought it, and that was it. And so I started reading G.I. Joe, and then within less than a year, I just started noticing. Luckily, I had a comic store down the street who had vintage comics, Silver Age at the time, which ironically Marvel's wrong. Those were 25-year-old books. It's the same age as the New Mutants, 98 now. It's crazy. And so, I saw the stuff on the wall, and I'm like, what is that? What is this early Fantastic Four number 8 and Spidey 2? And then, oh my God, this Golden Age Superman from, 1940s. So, I grabbed the price guide, and, it just started diving in, and it just was like, I just went down this giant rabbit hole. And so that, that's a path that people take at different speeds. Some people never, they go from the new comics back to the old, back to the really old, and then to original art and all that stuff. Some people get there, some don't. Some get halfway there, some take 20 years. I got there pretty quick, and I don't know. I had an insatiable appetite. So, with it still as a teenager, I was buying, our Golden Age, and just really getting into all the, as much stuff as I could. And
wow.
Yeah, so I was lucky that
you bloomed early.
I did, but there were circumstances that led to that. I like I said, I had a great comic store growing up. Then a good friend of mine opened a comic store, Bill Ponsetti, in '92. So I had a job right out of high school working at a comic store, and he had the same love for vintage as I did. So through that story, we went to San Diego Comic-Con for the first time. We became Overstreet advisors. And then eventually I went into restoration through that, comic restoration. And then from there it went to, CGC opened. So, I mean, it was like one thing after the other that kind of, so it's circumstance had a lot to do with that, being in the right place at the right time.
So let's talk about that. The restoration angle for comics for newer collectors, I don't know that people necessarily appreciate how commonplace restoration services were in the 1990s. I mean, they were advertised in the back of Wizard magazine. And before the inception of third-party grading, you were involved in restoration?
Yeah. I guess you could say I caught the tail end of it before CGC opened. It was kind of the golden age of restoration because, at CGC, fairly and unfairly kind of killed it. They didn't intentionally kill it, but by opening, and that's another question we get into, but it changed the market on restoration dramatically. And it's since come back around. But yeah, in the 90s and 80s, it was prolific. People didn't mind it. And yeah, there was Susan in the 80s. Well, Bill Sorrell started it in the 70s. And then Susan was a student under him, and then she restored for Sotheby's in the 90s. And then by the late 90s, Bill was teaching a lot of different people. You could actually go take a class with him. So a lot of other people learned through that. And you had the other guys coming from Canada and all this, So there was a lot of people that were, I guess, if you go back and look in the Overstreet, you'll see advertisements for different stores. And yeah, it was cool. I mean, I was working on, X-Men ones and FF ones and occasional Batman one, and big book would come through, and sometimes some smaller books. And yeah, it was very it was fun. It was really it's the most rewarding thing out of grading, pressing, removal, restoration, like buying, selling, all the things you can do in comics. To me, restoration was the most rewarding because you're actually rebuilding something and painting and putting all these pieces back in and trying to match it. And you would do all that, and then you'd press it at the very end flat, put the staples in, and then you'd open it, the press at the very end and take it out. It was like, that was like the payoff at the end. And, it was a lot, the most labor intensive out of all those things, but that's what made the payoff so great.
Yeah, there's been a heck of an arc with restoration that I think you sort of hinted at, where for a period of time, it was really kind of looked down upon after being very much commonplace for decades. And I think now, as you explained, I think people are far more accepting. Can you talk about the different gradations of restoration? I know that the labeling and the system for assessing restoration has changed over time. Can you kind of describe that for people?
Yeah, sure. It's it changed kind of. Well, first in 2000 when CGC opened, it's kind of set a scale. And prior to that, there was loose terminology about the extensive restoration or slight or whatever. And so CGC set up this scale, and it was basically quantity and quality. There was amateur professional was the quality, and quantity was slight, moderate, or extensive. Which essentially be like 3 categories. And then in 2016, when we introduced the conservation, we just expanded that from 2 and 3 to 3 and 5. We just took the quantity and went to a 5, 1 through 5, and then the quality was an A, B, or C. A being the best and C being like amateur. And so now within that framework, it obviously there's 12 or 13 different techniques of restoration. There's tear seals, color touch, piece fill, cleaning, staples replaced. There's all kind of different things that can be done, leaf casting and deacidification, bleaching. So, so we have classifications on, whether that's amateur, professional, or it can be both. It depends on the extent of what's been done to it. So, and then of course within there is conservation too. So it's it's a very complicated aspect. It's like grading is tough enough as it is trying to wrap your head around a 25 grade system. And then you throw restoration on top of that, and it's like, whoa, and then the conservation. So, yeah, I mean, we have some.
I'm probably losing viewers immediately. Like, why is he talking about restoration now?
Let's start with some more fun questions.
I just want to know the difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8. Why can't they answer my question? I've submitted 45 books, and all I get are 9.6s. Can't he just ask that one simple question? Why is he talking? No, I don't care what leaf casting is. Stop it.
Okay. Yeah. So, I know.
I care, for the record. I'm fascinated. And for all of the people that are like me and like you and want to learn and are fascinated by restoration, are there some secondary sources that you can direct them to, things that helped you over time or that are available on the CGC boards or elsewhere?
Yeah, there's not really, there is information out there on a lot of this stuff. You kind of have to dig for it, though. It's not like all in one place. And we're, this will probably come up in the future of the interview. But CDC's working on some transparency with our standards, restoration standards, grading standards, all that stuff. So we're moving in a direction now to where we, in the future, we have some ideas on how to to give that information out to the public so they can have a better understanding of not only what it is we do, but so they can identify that on their own books, whether they're in holders or not, or maybe they're submitting the books. It gives them a better idea of what to expect, so they're not caught off guard.
Yeah, or on a convention floor, because it's
a better
nerve-wracking.
Buyer. Yeah, better buyer, better submitter, better seller. Better everything. It really, it's just because comics are going in these holders and we're grading does not mean that the collector should stop trying to understand why we do what we do. And I think that's a challenge because we have a lot of new people in the industry now, and it's easy to just depend on the holder. And I mean, that is kind of one of the points of the holder is that we take that guesswork out of it. But when you get into like the nuances of grading and especially the vintage books, the more higher value stuff, understanding our system is critical to buying and selling. So I think it is something worth learning.
So what we can definitively report is that the information is forthcoming. You'll be able to link to it from CGC's main page, and you guys are going to try to provide some educational information about, how books are restored, graded, and so forth, and we can expect that sometime, hopefully in 2020.
Yeah, well, that's how we're going to present. Well, we've already got on the website. If you go there, it'll have a breakdown. We actually do have, if you go to the restoration scale on the CGC page, it does have very specific outlines of how much of each kind of restoration is allowed in each of those categories. So you can go down and it'll actually tell you piece fill, how big of a piece fill can be allowed in a 1, a slight, or a moderate 3 or a extensive 5. So that's, so that there is all that information is there. Yeah, I think I'm not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, there's a different. So this is, I don't know what page you're on there. Let's see. Go to CGC Grading in the top left. Okay. Go to the grading scale. Okay, and then go to restoration over on the right there. There you go. Yeah. So if you go down. So you see, it starts off with so you got the quality there at the top, ABC, and then here's the quantity 1 through 5. So it basically peaceful and color touch. Now it's interesting that those two things are pointed out because most everything in restoration is going to be slight in nature, except for two things really. With it, generally color touch, piece fill. Those are the two things. Tear seals, spine split seals, staples are placed, cover cleaning, pieces reattached. That's all slight in nature. But when you get into piece fill, obviously you can fill a chip or you can fill, half the front cover. Same thing with color touch. You can color touch a little stress lines on the spine or you can paint the whole cover. So those are really the two parts. And that's you saw on the website there. That's generally the quantity that we described there and quality is how we determine the ABC and the 1 through 5, and then, So we do have that laid out there as well. But, again, I tell people this, the best thing to do is just, if you can get to a con, which of course this year is, impossible, but the best thing to do, grading and restoration, is just look at as many books as you can. Grading in holders, you can actually, you can study the grading standards of CGC through holders. Restoration is tougher because you really have to look at the insides, you have to feel it sometimes. But, you can go to a show, even a local show with a few dealers, and I'm guaranteed you can find, you just go up to a dealer and say, hey, I try to learn about restoration. You got any restored books I can look at? And they'd be probably more than happy to hand you, here's some with some glued spines, here's some with some color touch, here's a full job that somebody did back in the 90s, and that's really seeing it in person and even talking to the dealer about it is really the best way to kind of learn is there on the spot holding it.
Talk to me about restoration detection. What goes into that?
Restoration detection. Okay, so
how long is this process? You've got to educate your guys for, I can't even imagine how long.
Yeah, well, yeah, restoration detection is certainly a difficult aspect of learning grading, because it's not there on every book. Grading every book, you have to grade every book. So every book has, some books have weird defects, but generally, you can develop pattern. Restoration, it pops up. It's there, and and you got to find it. you got to look for it. And it's like you're looking and you're looking and you're looking and you're looking, and then you think you see something, and then you're looking and looking and you see, you know, so it's very, but much more difficult to train somebody to look for that and to know what to look for, and know when to make a call on something. Now, you know, obviously we've got, you know, the rooms full of, you know, I mean, most of the guys that were there in 2000 when CGC opened are still there. You know, Sean Caffrey and Dave Kuyu and Chris Friesen and Paul Litch and, you know, Mark Haspel and all that. You know, so we've got, you know, that to all those years of experience have just trickled down through all the other graders. And everybody's always there in the room to check anything, you know, so if there's ever a question. But yeah, I mean, the process is basically, you know, without going into too much detail, when you pick up a book, and this happens in a matter of seconds, you're doing several things at once. You count through the pages first. You know, well, first thing, let's back up. First, you take the book out. You get your first impression. You look at it. You flip it over. You're feeling it. You're seeing it. You're seeing the ink reflectivity. You know, how tight is it? Is there anything, you know, loose pieces you got to worry about? You know, you just glance the front and back, kind of get a general idea of what the grade's going to be, page quality and stuff like that. Then you go through the pages and you count them. And as you're counting the pages, you're learning a lot of different stuff. Page quality, you know, whether it's, you know, supple or brittle, you're looking for married pages. You get to the centerfold. The centerfold tells you a lot of stuff. You look at the staples. Have the staples been opened? If they've been opened, then that opens up a whole flood of possibilities. You know, the tape on the staple, rice paper, maybe the staple's been replaced. Maybe there's married parts or married cover, you know, or any other restoration. You can tell splits at the spine and indicates brittleness. You know, trimming. I mean, there's like so many things. So that's all in just the page count, which happens in, you know, a few seconds. And then after the page count, then you get into like examining the book. Then you look closer. You know, you check obviously the cover is the biggest part of the grade. So you check the cover over, you look at the spine. The spine, obviously, most of your issues are going to be on the spine. And then you go through, you look at the inside covers, you look at the pages one more time, you check the edges, and then boom, you got your grade. And within that, you're checking for restoration because all of those spots could potentially have different kinds. You know, the edges have trimming, the spine has color touch or spine split seals or replaced staples. The middle of the cover may have, you know, color touch. The edges, you know, chips filled, tear seals, whatever. You smell the book. The smell tells you you know, not only how acidic it is, but also has it been bleached or clean. You know, maybe use it for pedigree identification. You know, there's you know, storage techniques. Just, you know, that they got mothballs or whatever. You know, if you're looking at a collection of 30 books in an invoice, you can tell if they all come from the same collection. Not only just how they feel and how they look, but how they smell too. So that actually helps in the grading process because, you know, you'll notice patterns whenever you're grading. The same defects show up in the book after book. So you know, so these are all things that we got to teach the graders to do as we're going through the book. But yeah, restoration is, you know, specifically, yeah. I mean, you ask me like pick a you know, color touch or something, and I'll tell you how to, you know,
I had like 35 follow-up questions as you went. That was amazing listening to you. That was amazing listening to you. It really was.
Yeah,
you know, I think the like scarlet you know, skeleton that lives in everyone's comic book closet is this idea of trimming. There seems to be you know, just like every 6 months or a year, some sort of like scandal that's on television. You know, there's a class action regarding trimming in baseball cards. And we've seen like a number of people, you know, who are, I think, super smart about comics. And they're like, look, sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. Can you talk to us about the difficulty of detecting micro trimming? You know, what kind of things you look for and the precautions that CGC takes to ensure best practices and a quality product for your customers. I know that that's an issue that's obviously, you know, not foreign to you. I mean, I'm telling you about nothing. Tell us, please.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, trimming is definitely one of the toughest things to spot. We can't give away. I don't want to give away everything that we look for because
I appreciate that. I understand.
Yeah, it's like the speed. What are those? The detectors, the speed detector thing.
We want good umpires. I get it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like you build a better, you know, detector, and then they build a better thing, and then you build a better one. And it's like this constant. So like the trimming, it's like the more I feel like the more I point out that we look for, people are going to start working that into their technique. You know? But no, I mean, but the truth is, and this is, you know, hopefully this will quell some fears. We really don't see it that often. It's not, you know, it's the boogeyman. You know, I mean, there was a couple of things early on that popped up, and you know, I think it was made out to be, it kind of stuck. You know, it just went on for years and years. Like, oh my God, trimming. You know, I'd like to think that 99% of the people out there don't want to do that. Yeah, they'll you know, maybe they try a little something here and there when they're sending books in, but to actually take you know, a knife or a blade to the edge of your comic books is you're going pretty far there. And there are people that out there that do it, but we really don't see it that often. And you know, it's, you know, occasionally we'll come across one where like, oh, you know, this is, wow, we didn't, you know, this is interesting, you know. But I don't see it being like an epidemic. You know, that's like, you know, rampant. Everybody's trying to trim their comic books. You know, and that being said, we do have, it's not, you know, there's 7 or 8 or 9 different telltale signs on the edges of comics. You know, there's the way they were printed before the calendarization of paper back when it was pulp, like 80s and back. There's the way that they're cut with, and this is common knowledge, but the point on the right side that goes down to a flat, you know, on the edge. People have always wondered why that point's there. I think, you know, I think we've got it figured out actually, and it ties into like 2 or 3 other things, which ironically tie into trimming, which you know, are signs that it's been trimmed. So it's one of those things where, you know, I've you know, we figured this out, and it's like, oh my God, I would love to tell people about this. I want to write articles on this, you know. But then if I do that, then it's like, well, that's a way now you can mimic that, and that way that it's cut, and then, you know, potentially fool people with trimming. So it's a scary thing because you're looking for something that isn't there. You're looking, you know, restoration is like adding to a book. You're adding color touch, you're adding pieces, you're adding rice paper, you know, you're changing the staples around. Trimming is like, it's gone. Like you took the edge off the book and you're looking for something that isn't there. So it's not like it's much harder to perceive or to spot, because you're looking for something that looks weird. You know, you're not looking for something that's there. You're just looking for something that's there, that's normal, but looks weird. And so it's really, yeah, it's a tricky thing. So you know, but I feel, you know, I feel confident that we're catching. Yeah, we're definitely catching whatever's coming through there. It's you know, but it's not much.
Now, if I'm on a convention floor and I'm looking at books, are there things that I should be acutely aware of when I'm looking at raw books, so that I don't get caught, you know, buying a restored book, whether it's you know, color touch or trimming, that aren't going to be patently apparent to, you know, your even somewhat sophisticated buyers?
Yeah, the 2 most common things are glue and color touch. Yeah, you come across a book that's trimmed, or you know, a married wrap, or you know, something like that. But those are all pretty. You know, generally, you know, when we nail something for restoration that's unexpected, it's usually glue and color touch. And it's, you know, color touch. Glue, you know, since glue fixes serious defects like spine splits, attached covers, you tend to see that more on the older books, like 70s and back. You don't really see that in 80s books. Color touch, though, you know, that you're hiding tiny stress lines, which could be on any book. So you'll see that all the way up to books that came out this year. So color touch is definitely the most common thing we see. It's not. Sometimes it's easy to spot if it's older work or work that they use markers where it bleeds. You know, you can spot that, and basically the best way to spot that is to just open up the inside cover, and where it's white, or at least the borders are white, and look particularly along the spine and the edges. But you know, that's basically where you're going to see it. So if it bleeds through, that's
out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, that's your easy, that's your like basic, you know, oh, it's color touch, you know. And then you know, more subtle color touch that doesn't bleed. The most common place is the spine or the black areas of the cover. So, you know, your black covers like House of Secrets 92 and, you know, Hero for Hire 1, those are going to have, you know, Spidey 28s. Geez, those are always color touch. black areas, but the spine line in particular, because the spine obviously is a big focal point of the book. So the little stress lines, and sometimes you'll see like you can tell if it breaks color or it's supposed to break color, and sometimes it'll not break color in the black line, but then it'll break color to the right of it, and you're like, well, wait a minute, how did that happen? So, and then you tilt it in the light, and and put it in raking light, and then you can see like sometimes that the gloss doesn't, like the colors on top of the gloss, or there's a sheen to it, like if it's a ballpoint pen or something. So I wish there was an easy answer, just say this is how you spot color touch, but from the obvious to the extremely unobvious, it can range. But like I said, just knowing experience and just kind of having that those warning bells going off in your head that make you look closer. Then you get your loop. Loop is very helpful, and then the raking light. And you just kind of check very closely. Loop is really, I'd say black lights do not help. They for the main reason is that you can't see black color touch on black areas with a black light, and that's the most common color touched area. So right there, black light's useless on like 80% of it. And like professionally restored comics where they use acrylic paint, you can take a black light and you'll see all the areas they've color touched. But if you're looking for touch-ups on a spine line of a Hulk 181, no, it's not going to help you. So I would say a loop and good light is probably the two best tools you can use to spot restoration.
You've heard it here first. And when conventions open up in 2021, every person on the con floor is going to be walking around with a jeweler's eye trying to stare at comics.
They should
still have circles around their one eye. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and a miner's hat with a big light on it, right?
We get those from West Virginia. So I appreciate that, and I want you to understand that I appreciate that. Unfortunately, a lot of this is like asking the guy who umpires the World Series, tell me how to call strikes better. And I'm sorry about that. Tell other people how they can call strikes better. And I'm sorry about that.
No, that's so you mean like basically making a decision on a grade.
Well, just this whole conversation. I mean, that's kind of the hardest part, because what you do, as you've indicated time and time again, is a product of a lifelong experience of loving comics and looking at, Lord, millions of comics. It's fair to say.
Maybe a million, maybe close.
That's what I was trying to think. I'm like, 10, 100,000, guaranteed. I'm sure millions. I
never sat down and thought about it actually, but maybe.
But tons of seeing tons of pitches. Can you kind of talk about the traditional defects that get, for lack of a better word, ignored or AOK'd or fiated away by CGC, whether it's binary tears or certain color rub that kind of gets ignored, and you guys give 9/8 anyway. I mean, I know that Marvel paper for modern books is specifically difficult because you just like blow on it and it's messed up. Can you kind of talk about some of those things and help us learn a little bit about that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. The modern comics you mentioned, that this question sounds more like, I guess it would, the modern comics would be the biggest part of that answer.
Well, like ASM 361 has,
they've got the little printer holes in the back cover bottom, and then the Spidey 129s have the little tear, and the Hulk 181s have the ink smear on the spine, and they've got there's a lot of books with a lot of particular defects, and we'll ignore them up to a point. I think the answer, and this is the big answer for moderns, is that with the variations in the printing process with new comics today, and obviously a lack of concern for, I guess, the quality in some situations, and whatever the case may be, we have to create kind of a curve in the grading scale for some of these particular books with particular defects. Like if you see it on every book, literally every book that's printed from that run, you're going to have to make an exception, depending on how bad it is. It may be a defect that's completely ignored, 10.099, or maybe it caps out at 9.8. Or if it affects half the run, then maybe it makes it 9.6. So it really depends. There's so many books like that have these little nuances, and so that's been a tough issue for modern comics because it kind of mucks the grading scale up a little bit. It's like creating a scale for books that were printed 40 years ago is easy or easier because they're all been printed. We've seen them all, and you've got a scale over here with new comics coming out every week, and you don't know what's going to get thrown at you, and so you kind of have to be, you have to be nimble and move with that because you've got a lot of expectations based on that. So it's a moving target sometimes. And so it makes the grading scale a little bit more murky for ultra modern comics. But we've got some ideas on trying to be transparent with that in the future, to make collectors aware of particular issues with particular printing defects that we do or do not take this seriously or that seriously.
So one of the things that I hear people cry and complain about all the time, right, is, why don't I have grader notes? I just want to know what was wrong with this book. Can I?
Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate as much as anyone that there's a critic for like everyone. It just drives me insane, right? It's like you can find fault with anything, but I don't want to diminish this plea because I think it's heartfelt, right? Your customers, they just want to know. They want to learn more. If there's anything I can say universally about comic people, it's that they just want to know as much as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that process? Why some books have grader notes, why other books don't, whether or not there's any inclination towards providing some more information, or what the kind of considerations were where you were like, well, this is where we're going to do the cutoff for now, and maybe we'll revisit it later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the what you said earlier about comic collectors wanting information. I do think that's I don't know if that's bigger for comic collectors and other collectors in other fields or not, but I sense it is, and I like it because I'm a big information guy, and I like finding out information and sharing that. And so in terms of the graders notes, we do have something that's we're working on with that. But let me back up. First off, graders notes initially were never intended for the public. And this is true on the coin side. This is true on, these other collectibles. I believe there's some that don't even take notes, but it was intended to be an internal thing. The first few years of CGC, it was simply a way for the graders to not only communicate to one another about what they found on a book, but, as just kind of like a stamp, or a history of that book. So, if there was ever a question about that book, they could always see why they gave it the grade they did. It was strictly an internal thing. And, over time, it just, there grew this demand for graders notes. And initially it was to, maybe for like, pressing an upgrade or restoration removal, or, maybe they were looking at the book and they just could, like, why is this, whatever. But, it wasn't like this, like the pin on. And then now, of course, fast forward all these years later, and it's like this thing that people are really, some people are really dependent on. And the truth is that, some books we take notes on, some books we take a lot of notes on, some books we don't take any notes on. There was a book I did the other day. It was a low grade, I think it was like a fair or 2.0. No notes, because the label said it all. The label said, spine of cover completely split, cover detached, tape on cover, and, trend or whatever it was. And literally that was the only thing wrong on the book. So, in that case, the notes were like on the label. And, and then there's 9/8 that we'll put 2 or 3 notes on, because we're trying to communicate what it is that we see in the book. For whatever reason, we feel the need to put that in the book. And sometimes we put notes that wouldn't even be relevant to a collector, or but there's something that's important to us. that we need to know internally. So, you know, but I understand that people really want to understand. Really, it's about trying to understand how we arrived at that grade. And so, you know, the obviously the easy answer is what I did. Well, it's not the hard answer is what I did, which is I reverse engineered CGC grading by just going out and seeing a bunch of CGC books and literally sitting there one by one and checking everything. And why did they come up with a 7 on this? Okay, there's this crease. How long is the crease? It's this long. Okay, why did they come up with you know? But most people don't have that luxury. And so again, we're back to, you know, we're working on something to be more transparent with our standards. And so I'm hoping that this is going to shed a lot of light on you know, our grading standards for people, so they don't feel the need to have to depend on, you know, because the truth is that when you have a 9.6 or a 9.4, 9.2 and a holder, even a 9.0, even down below that, 99% of the time you can see what's wrong on that book. You know, there's nothing hidden. There's not some stain on page 12 or whatever. It's you know, it's the number of spine stress lines, how many break color, how long they are, you know, what the corners look like. You know, is there any foxing on the back cover? Is there, you know, any tanning going on? Do the staples have any rust on them? You know, these are things that you can see through the holder, and which is, you know, what I was saying earlier about reverse engineering. So, you know, if you submit books and you get them back and you study them, you know, there should be, you know, over time, you look at a lot of books, you should notice patterns in you know, what, you know, 9.6s compared to 9.8s and 9.4s and all that. So, you know, that's the, you know, obviously that's not the, you know, easiest answer would be just to have notes, but, you know, like I said, we do the best we can, but, you know, sometimes we just don't take enough notes for some people. So, you know, or any notes, but, you know, I would say typically on high grade books, spine stress lines is probably like the main reason they get downgraded.
Nice. I'm really interested in. I tried to ask inartfully about this before, but you are here to proclaim that we're getting more information. That there's a renewed commitment to transparency, and it's pretty sweet. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about doing, or what's percolating behind the walls?
It's kind of top secret at this point. Yeah, I can't really go into too much detail. I mean, it's nothing like earth shattering. I mean, we've just got a lot of different ideas. It's not like one
Dino,
thing.
put the black bag on his head. We'll get the rag and the jug of water. Come out of his closet. Now's the time. We're going to waterboard him for info.
Waterboard me. Yeah. You'll get the answer out of me. I'd probably crack pretty quick. But no, we have a few things. There's all kind of ideas we got going. And seems like new ideas are popping all the time. I mean, you know, even you know, I don't know. There's you know, there's a lot of information that a lot of people want to know about, and we want to get it out there. And we're thinking of a lot of different ways to do it, and we want to do it in a way that, you know, is beneficial to as many people as possible. You know, there's, like, for instance, we've got our grading standards. Here's a little peek. You know, without going into detail. We have in our system our grading guide, which is for our graders, covers I don't know exactly, it's like 120 defects. We literally have a breakdown of every single defect, a description of that, pictures, and if applicable, you know, if we can quantify it, we've got grades, you know, like a spine split. You know, a 1 inch spine split's this, a 1/2 inch is that, a 2 inch is that. You know, and we've got that for all of them. So it's all there, and that, you know, and that the reason for that obviously is consistency in grading and to train our graders, you know, new graders coming in and just getting everybody else on the same page. But, you know, that's you know, trying to get that, as much of that out to the public. You know, obviously we want to give it all away, but, you know, enough of it to kind of just give them a better understanding of how we're arriving at, you know, because the thing is that when we opened 20 years ago, we were the new kids on the block. I say they, because I was on the outside, like with all the other dealers and collectors looking in for the first 12 years of CGC. I was using them. I was submitting books, you know, dealing and all that stuff. So I know I've been on both sides of the fence. So, but when they opened back then, it was, you know, the dealers were all standing around like, okay, you're gonna tell us how to grade comics, you know, and it's flip flop now. You know, 20 years later, you know, with the movies blowing up and all these people on the internet, and everybody's coming in. The collective landscape has completely changed, and all the collectors now are a lot of, you know, they're new to collecting, they're new to grading, Absolutely. They're new to restoration checking and all that stuff. And so, they don't, and that's why I was saying earlier it was for internal, because we didn't need to give anybody grader notes. Nobody needed it because they knew their books, and now people are getting their stuff in and they're like, what is this? And so, they got 9.8 in their head or 9.6 or whatever. And then so, we see now a need has developed to get this information out, and we have the information. It's just a matter of, how we do it in what form or fashion. But, we are definitely taking steps to doing that. And hopefully that will, in a broad sense, educate a lot of these newer collectors or people with questions, yeah.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So at the same time, CGC is making a concerted effort to provide some objective indicia to educate the public about grading criteria. We all, however, know intuitively that there's art to coming up with these grades, right? Like, it's not just science. Like, a robot couldn't do what CGC does.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so
yeah, I thought about it. I've thought, but could I get a robot to do this? No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe a two-sided, maybe a coin, probably, but not a con. I mean, it get the pages. There's the feel. I don't know. Yeah, there's too many variables. But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, yeah, we're on the same page. It's the art of it. If you could kind of speak to that. I mean, how do you teach other graders the art of grading? I mean, sure, there's the handbook, the reference guide, but can you talk about that kind of like vocational apprenticeship that you sort of undertake with graders, when they walk in after you retain them?
Absolutely. Yeah. There is a limit to well, there are some people who get it. You can teach anybody to grade, but there's another level that only certain people can achieve, and I think that's something that you really can't put your finger on. Even early on, you can't. And so you really never know when you teach someone how to grade if they're going to be able to kind of have that intuition, I guess. Now people that are already out there and they know what they're doing, they already dealers or collectors, where they've already established that. But training collectors definitely difficult in that regard because like I said, you can kind of there's some quantity to it, but the art of it, particularly in the lower grade stuff, I always say that high grades is more of a science and low grades is more of an art.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with a much broader number of defects in a much infinite combination. They're like snowflakes. And so, it gets down to a point where you have to go off of intuition. You have to go off of, the art of it. And that's difficult to get. So when you're training somebody, obviously we have the grading standards. We run every month. We run reports that compare all the pre-grading and the finalizing, all the people to each other, and look for trends. We run test boxes through the room. We have a lot of up and down, cross training with each other. A lot of communication between the graders. So information is always changing hands. It's but we look for people that have that knack, that just get it, and it's really, you can't put your finger on it, really. It's strange because there's looking, two books that are structurally 9.4, let's say two Golden Age books, and one is dull, a little more dull, a little more dingy, it's not quite as white, it's not quite as glossy. But structurally, it's beautiful. It's a 9.4, and then you have another book next to it. The difference subtle, and a lot of people may look at those two books and think they're the same, but there's sometimes a world difference between the two of them. So it just goes on and on like that. So it's definitely something that we're always striving to raise the bar and trying to get everybody just as acquainted with all these little nuances of grading as we can.
So there's like what I think I can best describe as modeled practices. You've already talked about coin grading, right? And we've seen like these stickers that they've been putting on slabs. This presents really well for this grade. And when I think about low grade books, particularly, a 2.0 is not always a 2.0, right? Like, I mean,
like
and some look like a hot mess.
A hot mess, and some look great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you kind of talk about those sorts of variations and as a collector, the kind of books that you like, if you're going to pick up a low grade book, I assume, you've got some low grade slabs in your collection, stuff that you like or tips for people out there where you may be like, look, it might look like it's X, Y, and Z, but it's probably a lower grade. It just presents really well. Or any other kinds of practices that you think comics will soon be borrowing from sports cards or coins or whatever the heck else?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, okay, that's two questions there. The first one.
Sorry about that. I have a bad habit of doing that.
Fine, that's fine. The two low grades. As the grades go down, it's like a pyramid. The bottom. You can have 100 2.0s, and they can look vastly different from each other.
Right.
Where all the 98s are going to look kind of the same. And I would say, obviously barring missing parts like coupons and pages and stuff, how the cover looks. The biggest shocking thing is the spine split. The spine split, so like a fully split spine maxes at 1.8. If you tape it shut, it's like a 1.5 because now you have the tape on it. But that scenario can exist on a book that looks like a 9.6. So you could theoretically, and the split's hidden in the holder, so you could have a book sitting in front of you that's a 1.8 that looks like a 9.6. And then obviously on the other end of the spectrum, you can have 1.8s that look like they were, that pulled out of a toilet. So it's maybe not that bad. Maybe those are the pores. I'm sorry.
At least run over with a car.
Yeah. It's got problems. We'll just say it's got problems. Maybe a toilet. That's we'll leave that for the 0.5s. But and look, there's even some gorgeous 0.5s too.
Right. And we should talk about that, right? The blue label 0.5, because I don't think a lot of people know that, and that's interesting and important.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the same thing true with that. 1.8.
Now I've got 3 questions for you. I'm sorry. I'm just going to let you talk, and I apologize.
No, it's fine. Yeah, as many questions you want, but yeah. So the split 1.8, the missing wraps or pages for the 0.5. Again, you got a beautiful book that's a 0.5, and it's like missing a page. So the grade doesn't always necessarily reflect the eye appeal of the book. Which again is why I think it's important to understand the grading standards. Just generally speaking, or at least the nuances of why we grade like we do. But really, I mean, if you want to buy a 2.0, it's in your price range. You want a big book, and it's a 2.0 is going to cost you a lot of money. It really depends on what your tastes are as a collector. I mean, some collectors hate stains. Some hate fading, some hate, tanning, some hate, missing pieces, some don't, so, all of those things can be on a 1.8 or a 2.0. And you have a variety to pick from because you got all kind of books that look like that in 2.0. So, I would probably say that, generally speaking, most 1.8s and 2.0s they look low grade, but those anomalies, like I said, you get those ones with the spine splits or but see, the ones with missing pages though, that look gorgeous, inevitably get they get the parts married in, because then they're going to get a much higher grade with a qualified grade. So those usually disappear out of the 0.5s pretty quickly, or at least turn into something else, so because they're so attractive. But I think the other question you asked, let me think. I think I forgot.
Well, it's about because it goes to that, right? This we've seen it with coins where they've got like this, they grade them twice, right? Like with comics, it's a special sticker. But I think like NGC or I'm going to screw this up. I don't collect coins, but I know coin guys. they will look at books, like people do this with comics too. Like this slab presents exceptionally well, and they put a sticker on it. I think there's like a couple companies that do that, and that's a borrowed practice. I'm not really interested in that practice, but I am interested in these borrowed practices from other hobbies.
No, we are, and actually, yes, that is one that we would like to adopt, that we eventually will, because there are books. You know what it is? It's the criteria for what it is. That's, to me, is the differentiation, because the idea is sound. This book, you can take 494s or 594s, line them up, and you can see subtle differences in them that are more appealing to like a deeper color strike or something. So I do think it's a way to differentiate between same graded books, but the trick is to do it in a way that people understand, they agree with it. Like, for instance, press candidates. Okay, like, I don't know if any of these guys do this, but if it's a press candidate, we'll put a check mark or a sticker or whatever on it. I mean, like that makes sense. Okay, you're pointing out a press candidate. Okay, but it has to, beyond that, like color strike would be one example. They're just, they're like X-Men 1. Most of the keys, actually, most of these books, especially the Marvel Silver Age, pops into my mind. But they're just ones where, at the print run, they loaded the ink up into the machines, the rollers, and the cover started going. And I mean, the color was so deep. It was so, I mean, the reds were, blood red, and the blues, just everything was so deep. And then gradually the covers would get lighter and lighter, and then they would go dump more ink in the thing, and then they would go, deep again. And so, there's certain books, a lot of these books, where you get them in the grading room, and every once in a while, Spidey 252 or Hulk 181, you're just like, oh my God, this book, it's like the colors are just like so vibrant and so deep and dark that, the color strike is so deep that it just stands out. But, we still got to grade it. We still got to count the spine stress lines and the corner creases and whatever, so it may end up being a 9.4, 9.2. But I know that if you put that book up against another one in the same grade, it's going to be, it's really going to catch somebody's eye. And so those are the ones I think that, so I think that the concept is sound for comic books, and I would like to do that. So yeah, I think it like I said, I don't know anybody, I don't pay attention, but to me, that would be, what I think would be a good way to kind of frame that service. One of the things.
What I'm hearing from you is that CGC is not a static company. We will continue to innovate, and these are the kinds of things that we're looking to do. I mean, I've heard a number of like really exciting ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell us about?
Huge.
Yeah. Can you tell us about any other ideas that are percolating there at the rooms of your inner office? That I won't get you in trouble for sharing.
3 or 4 things just popped in my head, and I was like, nope, can't talk about that. Nope, can't talk about that. Nope, can't talk about that. No, can't. Yeah, no, probably not. there's a but, because you know what, when we're ready to let you know, we let you know. Me sitting on my sofa here at the house on Saturday night, I am not authorized to let you know at this point in time. I'm sorry.
We understand, and we're appreciative and excited about the news that you've shared already.
But yeah, no, there is, but there, yeah. I mean, but what you said earlier, innovation, growth, just there's so much stuff that I feel like everybody that's there on our team right now is on that bandwagon, pointing in that direction, locked and loaded, ready to go. We have a great team, and everybody's really stoked about trying to get, there's we've got all this information. We have such a burgeoning market, such a need and desire for all of this stuff, that everything's there. All the elements are there. You just got to do it. And so, like I said, I mean, really the main issue right now is just trying to find that, there's always stuff in the pipeline, and especially with all the stuff going on now with COVID and everything, it's slowed everything down. So, but I mean, it's just a matter of just trying to get it all, set up locked and loaded, and then bam, off you go. So we've launched like with the pedigree label and the signings here, and the the eBay authentication service and all that stuff. So we've rolled out a lot of stuff over the years, a new holder and everything. So we're on a path where we're dropping things here and there as we go. And yeah, but we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline that is in various stages of completion. And I'm excited. I'm very excited about what's coming up.
Okay, so there have been maybe 1,000 questions, and Bryan was kind enough to offer to put some of those on the bottom of the screen. Will you be able to read them?
Let's see. Okay, is this in private or live?
Yeah, well, Bryan will hopefully drop them on now as we go. Let's see if we can get some of them.
I've been trying to read the live feed as we go, but it's been really there's a lot to read, and I'm trying to
Okay, so this one should be. Can you read that at the bottom of your screen or no?
At the bottom of no, I don't think so. I see my live comments down here at the bottom, but
well,
wait, here we go. Question, the one right below us.
Right below us, yeah. Can you read that, or is it too small?
Diamond notify CGC when it put that one?
Yeah.
Okay, let me read it here. Does Diamond notify CGC when a particular modern book has sustained damage on all or majority? No, I don't think they do. Sean would know better. Sean Caffrey's our head modern guy. He would know better, but I think the answer is no. I don't think we have that kind of level of communication with Diamond on that sort of thing. I think it kind of it comes in the aftermarket, when we get the books in for grading. Okay, let's see. How do you tell the difference between something that was trimmed or if it was an issue from the printer? Yeah, that's a vintage thing. I mean, modern comics, not really an issue. And it's back to what I was saying earlier. There's telltale signs on the edges of the three edges of the book from the printer, and they, I can't go into detail about what they are, but there's a certain way that the pages look, the way that they're printed and cut, and then after that point, you've got the things that we all know about, overhang on Marvels from the 60s and even the 50s. They got a lot of books with overhang. There's the point, the V, all right. So there's actually like 3 V's. Here's the thing. So there's actually like the V on the right side that we all know about, but there's actually a V on the left side of the top edge and a V on the bottom right. So there's actually 3 V's in 3 opposite corners. And that's because the interior pages are shifted whenever they're printed, pressed, and trimmed in the press. And so those 3 V's have to exist. Now there's all different ways that we can tell how those 3 V's are supposed to look on the 3 edges, but that's essentially generally speaking the way comics were printed from day one in 33 all the way into the 80s. That's that V's there on 99% of them. So that's the main thing to look for. But people try to we've seen a few books where they try to mimic the V. So then you get down to a level of trying to spot the techniques, I guess, to try and mimic the V, versus what looks authentic and what looks manufactured, I guess, or hand done or something. So it's interesting. It's a moving target, and but like I said, it's every once in a while, every once in a blue moon in the grading room, you're like, somebody's like, okay, what is this? And then we all come over. We all come over and we look at the book and we all examine it. We all give our 2 cents, and we make a call. So we're all looking for it. We all know what to look for. Doesn't come up that much. Most of the time trimming is pretty obvious or semi-obvious to us at least. But it is certainly, as I said before, the hardest thing to spot on books.
Yeah, and I don't want the people in the live chat to not be privy to our prior conversations. A lot of the modern questions are better suited for the head modern grader who you just referenced, who hopefully will be able to get on the podcast here soon to answer some of those questions. I don't know, for example, that you would know the answer to some of these, like, what I think are pretty esoteric questions, but I guarantee he would. This is not one of them, though.
Oh, how often do you run into a book that's been leaf casted? Okay. Just leaf casted, I'm assuming, because yeah, leaf casted with color touch and everything else, that would be just a regular restored book. I believe what they're asking is just leaf casting. So, which is a new thing, because before leaf casting, piece fill was done, by hand with rice paper or other parts of comics or whatever. And then leaf casting is like, I don't know if you know anything about it without going into, it's not a big secret, but basically it's this really cool process that was, they sometime last century, they came up with this, somebody came up with this process where you can take pulp and put it in water, submerge a comic cover underwater, and you pour this pulp slurry in, and you turn on, and you basically suck the water down through this vacuum system, and all the pulp gathers into the missing parts of the cover and fills it. And if you get just the right amount of pulp, mixed just the right way, it will fill it perfectly, the right thickness, the right, flexibility and all this stuff without going, everywhere. And then after it's drained, you dry it, and it's adhered to the cover, to the paper. It's like magic. It's really cool. And then you just trim the edges off, the excess, and then boom, you've got your piece fill. And it's like this, and it's seamless. So it was kind of a quantum leap forward in restoration. And but what's interesting is that the next step would typically be color touch, where you would then color in the missing paper. You would, to match all the other color. But there's been this since we launched the conservation label 4 years ago. There's been it's created another area of the market, or at least in collecting, where people steer their books into, so to speak. So, in other words, like, you may have some old restoration on a comic book, but it may, conservation is basically like slight professional restoration. Doesn't involve aesthetic improvements. It's strictly structural. So the point of conservation is just keep the book together, keep it on one piece so you can read it, preserve it for the future. It's not aesthetic. So aesthetics would be like color touch. So there's no color touch allowed on a book that's conserved. No amateur stuff. So you can't have like hard glue or, typing paper that you've taped to fill in a corner or whatever. No tape. Tape's not allowed. Trimming is not allowed. It's we made it to where it's like basically the work has to be A quality and slight in nature, one, and it can't have color touch and these other things. And so so it's kind of like got this. It's developed like an appeal for collectors, and so leaf casting is part of that, because leaf casting is particularly along the spines. You may have a book that's separated, or maybe it's separated, missing some pieces or whatever. So leaf casting kind of like serves a dual function of like reattaching them, but also kind of filling in that missing paper too, which you could do that if you layer rice paper as well. But it gets the book back together, it gets the cover back together. You put the guts in, you put the staples through. Now the book is like solid, it's readable, it feels great. But the interesting thing is that if you leave the color touch off, good, it can go into a conserve label now. If you color it, it will go into a restored label, which is fine. And it probably might be a higher grade now because you've filled that missing ink. So the grade would be lower if there was, if it's conserved, because, you have these basically white patches where the leaf casting's there, but it's in a conserved label, which is really cool to a lot of people. So I think the question is basically like, how often do we see them? And not that often, there's a few people I see on Instagram that are active. Our guy Kenny that works with us, it's through CGC. He does a lot of leaf casting. He and I have been working together for over a decade. And so, so there's, but it, it's kind of like it takes the right candidate. And that's the thing, is that there's not a lot of like perfect leaf casting candidates, or restoration candidates for that matter. It has to be the right book with the right criteria. And, in this day and age, like Blue Label is like king. So, I mean, that's like the, back in the day, in the 90s, when I was restoring, people would restore 3.0s and 2.0s and 2.5s. But now it's like, that's sacrilege. If the book, even if it's a 0.5 or definitely a 1, people would prefer that in the blue. And it's really weird. And so restoration is kind of like been relegated to books that have married parts, books that were already restored and can't be unrestored, books that are trimmed, books that basically can never be blue. And so that's your pool of candidates. So conservation is kind of similar in that regard, that you're looking for a very specific book with specific defects that are going to benefit from that, just it would be better off than, yeah, I don't see much. Yeah, there's not too many. I don't see, well, here we go. Can CCS press prestige format books? Yeah, Killing Joke? Sure. Yeah, like the square bound stuff. Yeah, we can do those. We can't do, what are they called? Raised covers, the
Embossed foil.
embossed. Yes, we can't do embossed. Yeah, we can do pretty much almost anything else. In the future,
figure out how to do embossed covers, how to press those. I feel like you guys should like solve global warming or something.
Cancer, right? Yeah, it's up there with that list.
On COVID, man.
Oh, I know. Whoever does that's going to get should get $1 million prize. But you can communicate greater soon. First appearances. Oh yeah, since okay. There we do have people that deal with that. We've got a couple of us in the grading room deal with this specifically. If
sounds like a terrible fucking idea, pardon my French, but I mean, good Lord, I don't want you guys to have to listen to the crybaby complaints of the community about like, this is the first appearance. Sounds horrible.
Yeah,
sorry, Rashawn. You get vetoed by your host. It's terrible. It sounds terrible.
I don't. I mean, I don't know. It's like you kind of said it. It's like, yes, we would love to fix everything that needs to be fixed or added, but we deal with a lot of phone calls, so I don't know. There's not a simple answer for that one, I'm afraid. I guess just be as pleasant as you can in customer service, and maybe they'll help you out. Let's just say
188 Hulk 181. You can talk to our grief counselors and therapists now. Hey, can I ask you a question that's not on the bottom of the screen? Have you noticed that, like, all of a sudden there's just sort of traditional ideas that have somehow been lost with, like, it breaks my heart. Like cameos, for example. Remember, like that, like there's just these, like, things that were always part of our vernacular and sort of like, just kind of gotten passed down through the ages and comics, and it's like poof, they're gone. Or even the idea that like key storylines are like real big issues, right? Like you remember when like the death of Gwen Stacy was more important than the first appearance of the Punisher?
You and Dinesh talked about this in your interview with him, didn't you?
I mean, like I see these things changing, and I'm wondering if there's ones that you've kind of noticed and have just been like, what the hell's going on? Like the cameo thing that, there's a lot of people who are really into like first advertisement in the back of a previews catalog, like,
like
there's all these things that are new trends that are emerging, and we're seeing it in collecting, and then we're seeing it in the grading side too, like, restoration, for example, just falling out of favor. And now, thanks to, I think, the conservation label and some sanity, people are no longer, just being fire and brimstone on purple label books or conserved books. What are some of the ones that are interesting for you that you've kind of picked up over the course of the last decade or two?
The interesting
these sorts of like changes to like our sort of comic shared knowledge or whatever it may be.
Yeah, there, as far as you say about the reading and the cameos and all that, I do look at I look at vintage and modern in different ways in that regard. I feel like the vintage books, there's a dual thing going on there. You've got the classic stories, particularly the Marvel Silver Age stuff that Stan and those guys did. The ECs from the 50s, the early Supermans, Batmans, the time, there's so much great stuff to read, and you can read it because it's reprinted everywhere. And then obviously the stuff that was actually, the actual comics are, worth so much money that they, they end up in slabs, and you can't really, hold them and all that. And you can go to shows and see raw stuff, but so that's being, I think the being able to have those two in one place is lost. You've got your slab with your book in it, and then you've got your reprint over here. And so that separation, yeah, that's a little sad. The modern comics, I know it's weird because like the readership, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many kids are reading now. I mean, when I was a kid, I was reading, and now,
They're not in grocery stores anymore.
yeah, there's not, they're definitely more dull, and the content is a lot better. I mean, and a lot more broad. To me, it's like the 50s. You had all these genres and all these great, artists and all of these great stories that were kind of geared towards adults, even though technically it was still kiddie comics. And now you kind of have the same thing where you have all these great series going on, and Hollywood's obviously a factor in there. But what's lost in there is like the kids, the kids, and it's not our fault. I mean, we're competing with the video games and the phones and all that other stuff. So I think it's a battle that's that we're, I don't want to say that we're losing, because I think we're finding a way towards these kids and to everybody through other forms of media, television and movies and everything. So even though readership, print runs seem to be a shadow of what they were 20, 30 years ago, or 30 years ago, there's still so much relevant stuff that's coming out and still finding its way to an audience, even if you're not buying it on the newsstand. If you're not buying, trying to think about, like Walking Dead, it's like how many people actually bought Walking Dead and read it the first few years, but everybody, and everybody goes back.
I think the direct market distribution of the first issue was 9,000 copies, according to Comic Cron.
Yeah, and I think we've graded 8,000 of them so far. So. We're going to have graded all of them eventually. They will all be in CGC holders.
You graded a couple of mine, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Oh, man, what's funny is that, and I'm not lying when I say this, I looked at it one day. It's been about a year. Every single copy has white pages. Every single copy. Which you can't say that about probably any other book. And actually, the low grade, there's only a handful of low grades. And there's a story, ask Sean this if you have him on. I think it wasn't Kirkman, it was somebody else that just, somebody tied with the show or something, that just had like a bunch of copies in their basement. And they got like waterlogged or something. And he's sitting there. So there's like literally on the census, there's like some 2 O's and some 3 O's and some 4 O's, that those are the rare ones. Those should be worth more money, because that's like way more rare than like the 9.8s and 9.6s and the 9.4s, so but anyway, so I digress.
Yeah, we talked a little bit before about foreign language comics and the emerging international comic market. This is one of a handful of really smart foreign language comic collectors, and if you could address his question and kind of talk a little bit about what we talked about privately, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and so some of the foreign comics don't have staples, only glue. Does it still get restoration? Well, not if the glue is part of the manufacturing process. Absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, even staples. If a comic has an extra set of staples from the manufacturer, we don't. That doesn't factor into the grade at all. So yes, as long as the glue was used, if that's what was used to bind the comic together, that would be fine. Yeah, we would not factor that into the grade at all.
So I think, can you talk a little bit about CGC and their relationship with these international comics? I mean, is that a trend that you see emerging, or something you're interested in?
You mean like the older international comics or the new?
Yeah, like these foreign language comics, like for example, there's the ones that I think are the hottest are the non-canon Spider-Man comics that feature Gwen that were published by La Presna, and there's just an example of one of the foreign language comics that I don't know.
That's the cover. Well, that first one was an actual Wonder Woman cover. That I don't know what the hell that is. That is completely redrawn. That looks to me like that could be a Chesler cover from 1946. With the little characters like attacking Cap. That's wild. I don't know what, I've never seen that before.
Yeah. So this is what I like about these wild covers, right? Is that there's new art. Yeah, because I'm like you. That's not a Captain America comic,
right?
That I've ever seen.
Yeah, and then like I was saying earlier, where they like some of that's got to be a pirated. That's got to be like a unauthorized. Somebody did that, totally.
I know there's non-canon like Shang-Chi. There's a lady Shang-Chi of Kung Fu or something. Fantastic Four, X-Men, all out of La Presna Mac in Mexico that got published. There's there's French Silver Surfer that are non-canon, and then I don't know, I forget where that's from. Robert Fordham, forgive me, please. Brazilian. It's there in the live chat. A Cap 69 in the guts with original art on the cover. Is that something that CGC is interested in creating a census for down the line?
Absolutely, absolutely. We want to capture all of this data, and like I said earlier, we've got some resources that we're working on to do that. I recognize that we're dealing with an extremely complex. I mean, where it covers, all these countries, authorized, unauthorized, the canon, whatever. I mean, it's daunting, and so it's not, it's not like something you can just walk into. You really have to have that information in front of you. So
I was thinking about collecting them, and then I ordered one. Well, I mean, I guess I bought them. Don't get me wrong, but I was thinking about getting a little heavier into them right before COVID hit. I ordered a book from Australia. I still don't have it. And I'll wait until the world settles down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited. I think I'm always looking for like other areas to get into. International comics. I mean, I don't know how big it is, but I mean, it's possible it could be as big as what's out there. I mean, it's the unknown that's exciting about it, and so much information is coming out so quickly, and there's guys I know that have a lot of information that go, they're very broad, and what they've shown me is mind-blowing. So it's like being able to peer into something and see it before everybody else does. There's a lot of people online that I'm sure are aware of this stuff, but generally speaking, the average collector, if you say, hey, check this out, here are 12 different versions of Amazing Fantasy 15. This one came out in 64, this one came out in 68, and all the covers are different or similar or whatever. I mean, that's like, that never even occurred to me that could exist.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of potential. Yeah. And we're on that. Yeah. We're like I said, it's something that we're working on. It's complex, but yeah, we're definitely working on it.
Here's an interesting one. The question basically, they're asking about archival tape and regular tape, and when you get purple labels and when you get blue labels, and
yeah. So tape is not restoration. Archival tape it blurs on a little bit because it resembles rice paper sometimes, and so generally, if it looks like tape, if it's in the shape of a piece of tape, it's on a staple, we'll call that tape. But rice paper typically is like torn and feathery on the edge and stuff. So every once in a while, there's something that could be, it could go either way. So we have to make a judgment call on that. But no, generally speaking, 99% of the time, your regular tape is not, even technically, even though it is a foreign object that's being put on the book to repair something, seal a split, reattach a piece, just like rice paper and all this other stuff. Technically, it should be restoration, but for some reason, I think it's because tape was used so prevalent. It was so prevalent back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Tape was huge. If we called tape restoration, then like half the books would be restored. And like in our holders, they'd be like purple labels everywhere. So I think the decision was just made to make it a defect. You can take, sometimes you can take tape off. Sometimes you can't. So I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle room with tape, but yeah, no, we just call it. Now, one thing important to point out is because it's a defect and not fixing something, when we grade a book that has tape on it and it is fixing something, we will grade it as if that defect has not been fixed, as if that tape is not doing anything. So if, for instance, back to our 1/8 example, if the spine is completely split and taped, it's still split. It's still a 1/8, and we're going to take off for it because now it's got a big old strip of tape on it. If you replace the tape with rice paper, now the split is sealed. We don't count that split in the grade anymore. It's the rice paper's conservation. So now it becomes a conserved whatever, if it looks 8.0 otherwise, now you have a conserved 8.0. So that's one of your examples of your perfect, candidates that you're looking for out there in the wild, where you get an 8.0 book with a spine split, but it's going to be a 1.8. You put rice paper on it, you seal it. Now you have a conserved 8.0. That is a huge jump in grade. That's one of the best, examples of where conservation really, pays off. And so, so tape does not, now and then, so anything that it fixes, we don't count, and its presence will potentially further downgrade the book depending on how much tape there is. Okay, so why do date stamps get the blue label, low grade, grade hit? Okay, I'm trying to decipher this a little bit. Sorry.
So
store stamps.
I think what he's trying to say is, so these Golden Age books, that have like Bucky's Books stamped on them, that collectors love.
Comics, yeah.
Yeah, they don't get banged, but my free comic book day has Midtown Comics stamped on it, my Umbrella Academy #1, and I get a green label for that.
Okay. Yeah, and this Sean can shed some more light on the modern side with the grading, because I'm not familiar as much with what these stamps are that are coming in on modern comics, like you mentioned Midtown. But generally speaking, date stamps, it's the commonality of it. It's kind of like printing defects for modern comics. If 80% of the run has a printing defect, now that's not to say that Golden Age books, 80% of them have date stamps on them, but they're extremely common. So
just like pencil.
Yeah, and it depends. Yeah, obtrusiveness is a factor. The size, the location of the stamp, how many stamps are. If there's more than one, usually there's just one. But there's also kind of like, with Golden Age collectors, a little bit of a lure sometimes to these markings because of the pedigree thing.
I like them.
It's cool. And up to this, into the Silver Age, and so they're real common. They're tied to pedigrees. Those collectors don't mind them as much. They're usually small. Golden Age books are usually like lower grade anyway, so they don't, matter, but yeah, when you get into a modern comic, particularly ones that just came out, they have no stamps. They're 9/8s, 9/9s, 10/0s, they're and usually don't see stamps on. So I mean that it's definitely that's probably why they factor into the grade more, because it's just the fact that they're not on there often. And
before you answer this next question, can I ask you a couple of questions that I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about?
Sure.
One, I like magazines, and I like some that are so big I don't even know how CGC could encapsulate them. I feel like I'd have to drive them home on a flatbed truck. Can you talk about those sorts of considerations? I mean, how those decisions get made, where the cutoff point is. I know for a long time you guys weren't encapsulating Warrior 1, for example, but now you are.
Is that like, are we talking like big, how big? Like how big is Warrior 1?
Warrior 1 is, I don't know if I got a 1, but I got a stack of Warriors over here. They're about that big, right?
Holy
so Warrior magazines, they were the ones that were I don't know if I did a good job. Maybe that's
that's bigger than, because usually the mags cut off at around paper size, like 8.5 by 11.
Yeah, it barely fits in the holders. But I know you guys have encapsulated them. They appear on the holder, and then there's so that's the reason people like that is it's the first appearance of Alan Moore's V for Vendetta and Marvel Man.
Right. And so, I didn't realize that we were putting those, they fit one of those in a holder. It's interesting. Well, look, we've been like treasury editions, which,
are too big.
They're too big. Yeah. Well, the problem is the bigger the holder gets, the greater chance of like holder damage, book damage, because it gets so, they get so heavy that we've noticed even with some magazines where there's certain like Playboys, they're really heavy magazines. They're heavy, and that weight creates whenever there's motion, it creates force, and so potentially, it has a greater chance of shattering those holders because of the weight. So that problem becomes magnified the bigger the book gets if it's heavy like that. So I think that's now that being said, treasury editions are a light. They're not nearly as heavy as Playboys, but the holder itself becomes almost unwieldy. So that's yet again another idea that we're working on. I've had some ideas about holding treasury editions. That's a little bit outside the box. Yeah. But so but it's like one of those things like at every company where it's like, all right, you got 50 ideas and like, you have to like rank and stack them in order of importance and all this stuff. And so there's I don't know where it is in the line, but eventually I'd like to see us get into holding bigger stuff, because there's a lot of cool stuff, not just treasury editions, that I'd like to see in holders. I mean, that's our business, is to put something in a holder, assuming that we can do it safely. So I'd love to explore that in the future, so we'll see where that goes. How much of the jagged edge? Okay, that's an easy one. Yeah, nothing. It doesn't take off. We don't jagged edges on Spidey 300s, Transformers ones. Common, again, it's a production flaw that's on a lot of copies. It's not an eyesore. We don't. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, Sean could tell you if it would affect a 9 out of 10, but up to 9.8, no, I don't think it has any effect.
Now, with respect to the CGC Signature Series program, I know that you guys have made a firm commitment to having CGC witnesses verify all signatures. Can you talk a little bit about that program? That's the one big offering that we haven't talked about. You guys have been doing a ton of signings here as people have quarantined. Any hope of maybe getting some Hollywood film actors maybe Natalie Portman, maybe Natalie Portman comes in and signs some Thor books for Love and Thunder.
That would, hey, I'd be down with that. I don't know. I don't know if we're working on
if she's single, slide her my phone number. You've got my digits.
Is she single? Okay. All right. So, yeah, no, I that's a great, because I mean, really, the sky's the limit, right? I mean, there's so many different people you could have to do that. That'd be a Brittany question. I don't know, even a Sean question. I don't know what they got cooking. They got, they got all kind of people I'm sure that they're working on. So, I'll probably go in on Monday and they'll be like, yes, we have her lined up for, July. So we're good.
I like that you work with powerhouses. So here's, I guess, probably the last question. We've held you hostage for about an hour and a half, and I really do appreciate that. But this is, so this is, well, hopefully we can convince you to come back if I wasn't too, annoying to deal with. But this is kind of the broader question and the broader takeaway. People want to know about the interrelationship between CCS and CGC. And like when I send a CBCS book in to get resubmitted, do the graders at CGC know? When I send a book to get it pressed at CCS, do the graders at CGC know? Can you kind of talk about the interrelationship that's going on there, the transparency, the Chinese walls that you've crafted or not crafted, or how that goes? I know you guys are affiliated, but to not put you on the spot, but like, how does that sort of what do you guys do?
Well, we have a Chinese wall. To answer the question, yes, labels, and this is true for any book that's submitted, not just CCS. When the label is submitted with the book, we do see the label. It's a benefit because it helps us identify if that book went with that label or, if it didn't. For 6 series, that's important. But yeah, so the label's there. And sometimes there's cases where, you've got a book that was graded back in 2004 or 2000 or whatever that comes in with a label. But the bottom line is that it doesn't matter what the book was. It's what it is in front of us right now when we're grading it. So, so it's not like, it's not like we see labels and that influences our decision in a negative way. If anything, I look at it like it's a way to maintain consistency, or at least to be able to make sure that, to be able to check ourselves from what we did in the past. believe it or not, most people don't send the labels in. They pull the labels, and they want to, because maybe they're hoping for it, maybe they're resubmitting with a press, and they want to, get out. They think that the grade's going to be higher if we don't see the grade or something like that. And we grade the book exactly as it is in front of us. We're not going to give a book a higher or a lower grade based on the label, being there. We grade it as it is in front of us, and we will go higher or lower if we need to. There are times where a grade was given 18 years ago that we disagree with today for some reason. We'll downgrade it or we'll upgrade it. Whatever the case is, page quality changes. But it's just to help us, to be able to maintain consistency and accuracy. That being said, a lot of people don't send the labels in, and then, I guess they send them in later, hopefully to take it off the census, the graders operate, we don't know who's submitting the books. We don't see that kind of information. Most books, the vast majority of books don't come in with labels. There's just constant new books that they're getting graded or signed graded or whatever. And so, we're just grading books based on our grading standards as they come in. And because the goal is to make sure that, every grade is correct on a book whenever people see it in the holder. So, so that's pretty much it with the labels.
Very cool. They want one more question. It's like an encore at a Pink Floyd concert.
What's the coolest book I've ever graded? Wow. I actually don't have a question. I mean, obviously everybody would think I would say Action 1. The most expensive book, sure, but and it's always a thrill to see Action 1s and any Tech 27, Marvel 1, all those books come in. The coolest book. Geez, I don't know. It was probably like some, oh, what it probably, okay. All right. I have an answer. My answer may be different in a year, but so one of my favorite books of all time is Suspense 3.
I was hoping you were going to say
that. Yeah, it is like, it captures everything, like the rarity factor, the Schomburg cover, the tied up chick, the Nazis with the hoods. It's rare. It's like, it's got like all the bells and whistles. It's like, cool logo, the red, it's the, and the Mile High run forever was, there was 1, 2, and 4 through 12. There was no 3. The 3 was like not even on the original list. I don't think. So it was just assumed there was no 3. And one day it showed up. Now, believe it or not, it's not in our holder right now, which I lament. But I did get a chance to see it, and it was like amazing to because I heard about it. I heard about when it came up, and I was just like, you got what? Somebody found there, it exists, and we weren't even sure at first. It's like, is this real? And then you get it in hand, and you're like, oh my God, this is it. It's got the code. It's like this is legit. This is like the holy, like my holy grail, one of my holy grails, the Mile High copy, like the best of the best. And so that probably was like, not just, it wasn't just like the coolest book. It was the fact that I didn't even think it existed. It's like seeing a book you didn't think existed, So yeah, that one pops into my head. That one was really cool. Yeah.
Before I let you go, tell people why third-party grading is so important. And thank you so much for being here with me. It means the world, not just to the CBSI extended family, all the people that frequent the website and the Facebook page, not just the guys here on the Flipside YouTube channel or the people in the live chat, but it means so much to our community that you're willing to be so open and answer all of these questions from people, with no rhyme or reason. You guys were like, so what kind of questions are you going to ask? And I was just like, I don't know. Here's some stuff. And you're like, sounds great. And I don't know if we talked about any of those. And it means the world to me. Thank you, my friend.
No problem. I love being on. I feel like we answered, 20% of what, we could have answered. So yeah, I'll come back anytime. It's fine. I've never done one at Saturday night at 9. This is pretty wild. But it's cool. It's like chilling in the house, you know, as opposed to being at work in the middle of the day and having to like, you know, drop everything and be like, all right, you know, Brittany's like, all right, you got to be in the room at 2:59. You got to go in, you know, and it's like, I'm like, you know, I'm hanging around, like I have dinner and I'm like, I got to go upstairs and do this interview right now. I'm telling the kids like, don't come up here. Don't be running around the background. Don't start making noise on, you know, it's like totally different rules. You know, it's cool. So yeah, we got to do this again for sure.
Thank you, my friend. It means the world to us.
Yeah.